My name's Elizabeth Power. I'm a volunteer at Grace Harbor, and prior to that, my husband had been a participant here at Grace Harbor. He had Alzheimer's. And the way I learned about this wonderful ministry was through a support group that I was in here at the church. There were probably 7 or 8 women whose husbands also had Alzheimer's. And so we, every week, would share with one another the stresses and the joys and the sorrows and everything that goes with being a caregiver. And it seemed like over the years, first one and then another would lose their husband. And mine was still alive. And then finally, my husband died too. So we kind of became a group of widows of men who had had Alzheimer's. But there are about 5 of us who are still very closely knit. I go to Thomasville once in a while to visit one who left and went to be with her grandchildren. So that's how close we are. And we're just there for one another like sisters, you know, family. So in that group, I heard all these other women talking about Grace Harbor, and I asked about it, and they explained it, and I decided, gee, John just doesn't have much stimulation. He just sits at home all day. He's not in contact. He doesn't have any male friends, or all he does is watch TV. He used to be a big reader, but he was unable to do that after a while. And I just began to realize he needed something more in his life other than me. And so I explored Grace Harbor. It seemed wonderful when I came for my visit. And John wasn't very far along, and so I guess I kind of tricked him. Robin and I decided that we would have him be a volunteer and that he was going to come to help give out the hymnals and do various things to help, which he was perfectly able to do for a while. And so that was the pretense under which I got him here, because he didn't think he had Alzheimer's, even though the doctor told him he did. It was just a concept that he wasn't ready to accept. So I let him be that way. You know, whatever made him happy worked for me. So when he started coming, he brightened up like a whole new person. It was just miraculous, really. He was more animated. He smiled more than he had in a long time. He had conversations with me on the way home and at home, and it was just magnificent. It was like he was back to the way he was when we met. John and I didn't have very long together. We married late, and we only had 8 years together. So reminiscing about those early times when he was healthy is something that's very dear to my heart. So I think John was here about 2 years, and he was here one Friday, and that Saturday my granddaughter was graduating from Georgia, University of Georgia, and I knew John couldn't manage the steps over at where they were going to have the graduation, because he also had muscular dystrophy and he had stability issues. So I had asked one of my friends from our group, Sally, came over to spend the day with John. He was a whiz at Scrabble, which is so odd, having Alzheimer's, but he could beat anybody he played with. So he and Sally played Scrabble all afternoon while I was at my granddaughter's graduation. Got home that night, she talked about what a wonderful time they had. And later in the evening, we woke up and he was having difficulty breathing. And I took him to the hospital, and he had pneumonia. And to make the story short, 3 weeks later he was gone, which I knew he was declining, but I was totally not prepared. I never expected him to be gone in 3 weeks. And I frequently said to myself, oh, if I had known I only had 3 more weeks with him, what might I have done differently? And I tried not to beat myself up about that, but you do wonder. And so sometimes when I'm talking to other people who are going through this, I try to find a way to say that this isn't a forever job. And It's kind of sad why it isn't, but it gives you hope too. I think if I had known I only had 3 more weeks, those last weeks would have been easier prior to the time that he went to the hospital. Maybe that sounds heartless, I don't know. So anyway, after I mourned his death and his loss for a while, Grace Arbor had been so wonderful for him that I decided I wanted to help. And so I came back and began to volunteer and absolutely loved it. Being with all these folks has been such a joy. They all have their own gifts. There's one lady that no matter what the topic is, she can repeat a Bible verse to you. And there's another gentleman who was unable to speak, but he was totally involved. You could see him mouthing the words when we were singing. And one of my favorite stories is he had a little grandson. And when he came in that day, I sat next to him, we were having coffee, and I put my arm on his shoulder and I said, "So I hear you're a new granddad." And he said, "Boy." I had never heard another word from him, but that day he was able to say he had a grandson. And that just touched my heart and filled me with joy that he was able to say that. And when his wife would bring the grandchildren in, they would run to him and just wrap their arms around his legs. And it was just such a loving experience to see. So things like that can't be repeated. Those are gifts you're not going to get anywhere except at Grace Arbor that I know of. So it's been a gift and a joy for me, and I hope that I've added some bit of joy to the folks that are here, both the volunteers and the participants. So happy 15th anniversary to Grace Arbor and everybody that's involved with it.